What's up everyone, Justin here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's a continued restoration of my Lotus Evora S, but I'm going to take a slight detour and cover a methanol kit that I've had kicking around since December, and I actually wanted to get it installed on this thing before I get the front clamshell and the front bumper installed, because now's the opportune time. I'm going to be mounting the pump pretty much right next to the washer bottle. I couldn't install it until just today because I had a bracket that I was waiting on that side. It was destroyed during the accident. Now that I have the bracket, I could kind of visualize where everything is going to fit. And so I'll go over an overview of how I'm going to be installing this, trying to use as much factory stuff as possible, and how I'll be running it towards the back where there's going to be a little throttle body adapter that I'm tapping for the nozzle. And then I'll just kind of skip ahead and show the end of what the installation looks like. I'm not even going to be able to really test it until later, but I'll do a touch base on that at some point afterwards. But I'm down to the wire right now with the salvage inspection, so I really don't want to spend too much time on this, but obviously it's something that's really cool. I think that people should be able to see at least what this kind of looks like in case they're interested. And so there it is. So yeah, without further ado, let me just jump into the components. Okay, let's talk meth. This is typically what you're going to get in a water-methanol injection kit. This is a stage 2, maybe a 2.5 from Snow Performance. Any methanol kit is basically going to be essentially the same. This came from somebody that was going to be installing it, I think, a Ford Econo boost. So there were some extra things that were thrown in here, like throttle body, spacers, that are not going to be included with the usual methanol kit, but that's okay. I'm just not going to use them. There are some key components here that you will find. There's the bottle, obviously. This is the reservoir that you'll use water and meth in. There's your pump. This is a 300 psi unit, so high pressure, which is good. You get better atomization that way. This also has the solenoid. I guess that's what makes it a stage 2. Solenoid is cool because it gives you a little bit more precise control over it. You don't run into any flow issues where it would just start rampantly sucking from the bottle. So it has a little bit more control over it, and this is going to be PWM, pulse width modulated control from the controller. There's a low fluid alert. This is basically just a little switch in there that when the fluid gets low in the reservoir, it'll set off a dummy light. Got a little bit of tubing here. This is an aftermarket piece, but this is basically your nozzle holder. So the tube will go in here, and then your nozzle would typically be in there. And then in the intake track, you got some Y splitters in case you were going to do 2 jets. And then I ordered some additional tubing. I ordered a throttle body spacer for the 2GR FE. So this is for a regular Toyota. They said that this is supposed to boost mileage or whatever, having a spacer in there. I don't know if I believe that, but I'm only going to be using it to tap and then put the nozzle in there as cleanly as possible, so I didn't have to make any modifications to my engine per se. I don't want to like tap the supercharger or anything crazy. I like putting in mods that can be backed out, and so I do want this to be completely reversible for whatever reason if I decide to go backwards. This is the controller. So this is the brain. This is a VC25 MAF. I don't think they make these anymore. This one's cool because it has the ability to take in boost as a reference or tap directly into your mass airflow sensor. I'm going to be using the MAF. The reason is because it could start spraying before it comes into boost. I really only want this thing going on in boost, but that's the benefit there. Instead of just relying on a boost signal, is that you can take the voltage signal in, and then that will actually spray before it leads into the boost. There's also no boost tap on the S1. I think they put that in the supercharger units that had the charge cooler. There's a little boost tap. With this supercharger, I would have to drill and tap my own boost reference after the supercharger. I don't want to do that, so kind of have to use the mass airflow sensor signaling in that case. So that's the components. As far as mounting, this is what I'm looking at. Got the washer bottle just mocked up here, and I'm building a bracket actually that's going to hold the pump right here. And then the pump orientation, it says in the instruction manual that it could basically be any direction. So I'm going to mount it upside down, or like this basically, where the nozzle head's going to be at the bottom, and then the head has in and out. The in I'm going to draw from probably over here is where I'll put the bung in, where it's going to tap to take the fluid. That fluid is going to be below the factory washer fluid low level sensor. And that's important because basically I'm going to use the washer fluid from the car. I'm only going to be running summer blend because winter blend would clog the the pump. That's something I learned from my last car. And I could also just run water if I cared, and I wanted to keep this thing really clean. But I'm going to just use regular windshield washer fluid with high methanol content, which is a perk, using the stock reservoir instead of using this aftermarket one, because I would have had to be concerned with where to put that. And then it's going to use the low-level sensor from the stock washer pump. And so when the washer fluid is low, I know that the pump is running low, and then I'm going to want to top this thing off. So using, again, as much factory as possible, I'm going to put the bung in right here, going to mount the pump right here, and then I'm probably going to build some kind of shield to prevent debris from affecting the pump, hitting it and getting rock chips and whatever else in it. And then as far as the line's concerned, it's just going to come out of the head. I'll have it just go up here, flexible, and then down and underneath. The wiring for the pump is also going to come that same direction, back this way. And then I'm going to have it tapped off a fusible link or a fuse or whatever off the battery in the trunk. And so that's it. The controller is going to be mounted in the trunk. And the pump, or solenoid rather, I should say, is going to be very close to the throttle body. So that's the setup. The bracket itself, I lucked out. I actually had one, a bracket that I had from scrap that fits perfectly. Actually bolts up to these two bolts right here that I'm not using because I don't have a cooler on this side anymore since it was damaged in the accident and decided to bypass it. And so that's going to just literally bolt in here, bring it out over here, and then the pump is going to mount directly to this. It's a very heavy bracket. It's drying right now. I just painted it. So that's the whole setup. I'm going to start bolting things up, and then I'll overview it once it's complete. Alrighty, got an update on the methanol pump install. You can see I have it mounted here now with the bracket I had fabricated, and I painted black to protect it. I have the wiring all in place. I have the hose coming out from it routed, and so pretty much good to go now at this point. The wiring is coming from the controller that's mounted in the trunk, or will be mounted in the trunk. And then this hose comes up and over and down, and it all goes through here. So it runs along the side, along with the coolant and oil lines. Pretty straightforward. And I ran the cabling for that. You can kind of see the yellow and gray cables. So I have, I think it's, I want to say 12 gauge that's running to the pump. And then 14 gauge I ran extra up here in case I needed for some other future use. Figured while I was running those cables I might as well run some extra. All right, so anyway, methanol pump is mounted here. It's drawing from the washer reservoir, the factory one. Screwed the bung in, and that's pretty much it. Pump head is below that point because it has to draw from basically gravity. So it's gravity fed, and it's a pusher, not a puller, is what the documentation says. So that's the pump. If we go to the trunk, inside the wheel well here, you can't see it, but I have lines around up and over. And I put in a small hole in the trunk for the gray wire, and a small one for the wire that's going to be from the mass airflow sensor. So that's that. So the pump is going to use this. The ground wire for the pump is right here. I could have grounded the pump at where it's mounted, but I'll run the ground here. So that'll be power and ground for that. And then the MAF is going to use probably this red wire here. So the controller itself, not very complicated. There's 4 wires, I believe, and don't quote me on this right now, but green is the output to the pump. So that'll go to the red. Ground is pretty self-explanatory. That'll ground to the battery. I'll put a fusible link for this. Maybe, I don't know, 5 amp maybe. I think it might actually be a little bit more, maybe 10 amp. whatever the spec is, I'll make sure to use that. The ground for the pump is also going to go to the battery. And then I think yellow is the MAF. So that'd be your voltage input. And then I'll put it onto MAF mode, which is all the way counterclockwise. So that'll satisfy the controller. And then as far as the physical plumbing, you can see I ran the meth hose up and over here. It's a 1/8 line. There's your solenoid. The solenoid is tapped off the same wire as the pump. So that's coming in. And the gauge right here is actually visible from the driver's seat. And so the point of that is, instead of having a dummy light, I'll actually be able to see the pressure out of the solenoid prior to it going into the nozzle, which is going to be spraying into the throttle body. So I might eventually get rid of it, but at the beginning I want to be able to see and make sure that visibly I'm seeing a pressure build and that it's actually spraying. And this is obviously one way to tell. The other way to tell is if you had an IAT that was mounted after, you would see your IAT temps dropping. But since the IAT is built into the MAF, this is really the only way to go about it. So I'm going to monitor the physical water pressure there. And then the throttle body spacer, this is what it looks like. So this is going to be mounted just in here, basically between the supercharger and the throttle body. There are 4 bolts that hold it in place. I needed to just order longer bolts. That's why this one is missing here. It's M6 by 70 millimeter total with the spacer. So that's what I ordered. 4 stainless bolts. And then all that's left is to tap this. So I'll have to drill it and tap it for the nozzle, which is, I think it's 1/8 NPT. So that's basically it. So this is going to be in here. The nozzle, I could either spray it, have it come in this way, but I might just go through the top. There's plenty of clearance here. I think it's a low mount, so I'll probably just do it in the top. You want the nozzle to be mounted in the upper region for, so it's not getting gunk built up in it and whatever. So you want it spraying basically downward. So that's that. So gonna wait for those bolts to come in. I'll get this disconnected here. I'll have to get the controller wired up, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's finalized. Then we'll get to playing around with it. Alrighty, stay tuned. Alright, so I just wanted to show briefly what the spacer looks like temporarily installed. So I just have one bolt holding it in right now. But that's it. This is a spacer off of a Toyota Camry. And this is the shallowest nozzle holder that I have. But it would still look pretty ridiculous tapped into the top like this. So you can see the clearance, it'll just be kind of silly. So I'm going to put it in the back. I'm thinking there's enough room back here. A little bit down from the hoses. And that should be good. So this is a 1/8 NPT. So I'm going to drill in. I'll mark a spot. I'll drill it, tap it. And then that's where the nozzle will thread in. And then the nozzle holder like this is just going to screw onto the end where the filter is. See how that looks. And that's it. And it's just a push connection for the hose that goes in. So I'm going to work on that now. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Justin here. Yeah, it's been a few days. Had some setbacks. I'll explain briefly, but basically I have a mess in my trunk right now with this methanol install. I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. I'm also going to have to do like a Visio drawing or something to better explain the circuit that I made here, but hopefully by the end of this little segment you'll understand better what I'm doing. Mass airflow sensor is obviously back here. It's a 5-pin connector. If I pull it off, you'll see it's got green, black, blue. All right, the end 2 wires, the blue and the black, those are for IAT. The other 3 are for the mass airflow, essentially, with the middle one being shared. So you have mass airflow signal, mass airflow ground, 12-volt reference, IAT ground, and IAT out. Okay, so that's how that's wired. And then if you look at the back, it actually has numbers. So the 5 all the way to the left, that's mass airflow signal. All right, so that's the most important one. Signal, signal, signal. because that's going to be used by the controller. The middle green wire is 12 volt reference, and I'm only using that to trigger a relay to activate the controller when the car is on. Here's what your controller looks like. You got 4 wires, and just to recap, red is power, black is ground, yellow is mass airflow, green is solenoid and pump output. So that's that. As far as the relay to power this thing, all right, I did a lot of thought. I don't want the controller on all the time for obvious reasons, so I have it on a relay. The relay is powered to power the relay itself to activate the switch inside of it off of the 12 volt reference from the mass airflow sensor. So basically when the car is on, this relay is activated. However, the ground is broken up by a wireless relay. This relay is normally closed, or it could be normally closed or normally open, but I have it set to normally closed. And basically that's because I want the mass airflow controller on by default. But I want the ability to be able to turn it on and off, hence the wireless portion of it. I didn't feel like drilling another hole in my dash. I didn't feel like running under the wire. And I want this to be fully reversible in case I decide I don't really like doing methanol injection. So this is what it is. It's a wireless relay, so I could shut off methanol if I decide I'm low on washer fluid, or I just don't want to use the methanol, like I'm on a dyno and I want to see what the power increase is going to be. All right, so I figured that would be a useful contribution. And again, that breaks up the ground going to the relay, so that basically once I kill the ground to the relay, kills the relay, shuts off the controller. I have the power to the controller on a 15 amp fuse. I think that's sufficient for the solenoid and the pump, so should be good there. You can see I have one of the other relays sitting here. This is one I fried in a previous video by accident. Ground goes to the ground. Well, that wasn't good. Hope I didn't blow anything up. We'll test it and make sure. And so that's why this one's also sitting in a box, so that doesn't happen again, because it set me back a couple days. So probably more information than you needed, but it is what it is. Next steps. I need to back probe the mass airflow sensor when the car is on, because I want to see what voltage it's putting out by default. And then I'm going to increase the voltage baseline from idle, probably about 2 volts, since it's 0 to 5 volts. 5 volts being the max that the mass airflow sensor can read. I think up to 2 volts will be well into boost, and that'll be a good starting point for the controller. So if you look at the controller, it's got boost, and then you have start and full. So start is the point at which, I don't know what this guy's listening to. Start is the point at which it starts injecting water, and full is the point where it's fully done. It's 100% duty cycle. So I'm going to start kind of late. So I'm going to start at like maybe 2.5 volts, and then I'll have it at 100% at probably 5 volts, because all it does is it draws a linear line from the starting voltage to the end voltage. And since I'm using a decently sized nozzle, it's a number 6 based on the calculations I did, I want to start small. With methanol injection, you'll know that you're running too large of a nozzle, or you're spraying too much if the engine stumbles. Obviously, there's a risk of hydrolocking your engine if you use like an enormous nozzle, but that's probably not so easy to do. I'm still going to err on the side of caution by starting kind of small and then ending late, so that the line is kind of off the charts. So it'll kind of look like this instead of being steep, and then, you know, being 100% duty cycle early before I'm completely at red line. So that's that. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to directly measure IATs. The IAT sensor is built into the mass airflow housing, like I already pointed out with the wiring. In later Evoras, they did have an IAT sensor after the supercharger. Obviously, I don't have that advantage here. I could probably put one in and measure it, which I might wind up doing, I guess, if I get bored. But this is just what I have right now. I will be able to measure power output on a dyno. And so really that's where I'll be able to see what the benefit of this thing is. And since I'm not really tuning anything else with the car, if I did 3 runs, or maybe a little bit more than that, and I tweaked a couple settings here, I'll be able to dial it in pretty easily. So that's that. So yeah, I'm going to back probe, and then I'm going to just test this entire thing when that's done on boost, not on MAF, because I'm not going to be able to test MAF until the car is actually running and driving. So I'll at least have it set to MAF mode when the car is ready, but I'll be able to test it on boost. So yeah, anyway, stand by for that. All right, looks like 0.8 volts at idle. So I'll do 2.8 volts. It'll be all the way up here. And then I'll have the full all the way maxed out. That's about right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this to boost mode, which is actually already on from last time I was testing it. I'll get my handy dandy little pump. It was a late start. I'm at about 10 psi right now. All right. So knowing that this blower does about 9, I'm going to say I want it to start around, maybe 5 volts or 5 psi. But obviously I don't know what the voltage reading is going to be at that much, so it's all a guess until I actually drive this. But if I was doing boost mode, I could very easily simulate the psi that I want it to start at, and just adjust the controller, make sure that it matches up to what it's saying there. So 7 psi start here is 7 psi on the dial. But anyway, I could hear the controller activating, and that was a good amount of fluid. Look at that. Definitely working. Actually, put that back in. And the last thing to do is just test to make sure this is working. So I believe this should be good. So I'll test it by going all the way above trigger point. You can see that's working. The only problem is this is momentary. So I'm going to have to configure the controller here for latching. I think if I double click it, it'll go to latching mode. Yeah, that sounds better. All right. So here we go. Activated, deactivated. Beautiful. Alrighty, so there you go. That is a wirelessly activated water-methanol injection system for a Lotus Evora. So the only thing left to do is to kind of tidy all this up. I'm going to get the wiring all tucked away and cleaned up. Obviously I'll reconnect this hose to the nozzle. I'll pour the windshield washer fluid back in the car. And then I'll just have to drive it and test it out. So hopefully this helps someone. If you're in a similar situation, feel free to reach out. Happy to help with any guidance. And if you like this video, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.